Spider-Man's allies are often just as cool and unique as his villains, though most of them get swept under the rug. My name is AJ with Top 10 Nerd, and these are the top 10 most underrated Spider-Man allies. At number 10 is Steel Spider. Oliver Osnick was a bit of a fanboy for Dr. Octopus. I mean, I don't really see why you would see this supervillain as a role model, but I digress. Anyway, Ollie wanted to be Doc Ock's sidekick, so he made these metal tentacles to impress him. But surprise, surprise, he eventually found out that Doc Ock wasn't exactly a role model worth following. That's where Spidey swooped in to save the day. Spider-Man showed him the ropes, and Ollie had a change of heart. He redesigned those tentacles into legs, and bam, the Steel Spider was born. He tried the hero gig for a bit, but life eventually got a bit too complicated. He hung up his super cape, should I say his metallic legs, for a while, hit the books at college, but then he came back during the whole Civil War debacle. Now, here's the kicker. Venom eventually would go on to bite his arm off, which was pretty rough. After that, things got hazy. Last we knew, he got caught up in the Superhuman Registration Act mess and ended up in medical prison. Poor guy just trying to do good, but got tangled up in a whole web of complications. At number 9 is Yuri Watanabe's Wraith. Yuri Watanabe used to work for the NYPD and was literally the only cop who had Spidey's back, while the rest of the entire task force weren't too keen on the web slinger. She and Spidey were doing alright as a duo until the supervillain named Massacre showed up. Tried as they might, they couldn't stop his rampage in time, and this failure led to Yuri getting the boot from the case, and she wasn't too happy about it, to say the least. So what does she do? She reinvents herself as Wraith. No cape, no superpowers, just her brains, her detective skills, and some nifty little gadgets to help her take down the bad guys on her own terms. Now, Spider-Man wasn't completely on board with her solo gig, given her total lack of powers and whatnot. But when push came to shove, they did team up to tackle Mr. Negative. Now, even though Yuri was included in Insomniac's Spider-Man game, many fans still don't think that minor appearance did the character true justice, so we're hoping that changes in the future. If you're enjoying the video so far, please take a second to support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 are the Brooklyn Avengers. These guys got their powers in the most bizarre way possible, thanks to their landlord and some radioactive bed bug spray. Yeah, imagine that. They're like the accidental superheroes of Brooklyn. So back in the day when Peter Parker was still a budding superhero, he teamed up with this crew, which included Psi and Phi, two telekinetic brothers. The Hipster, that's hipst with an apostrophe R, pretty cool, who's an old dude who could hypnotize people. Paintball, who could generate paint bursts, kind of like a weaker version of Squid Kid from Splatoon. We also got Boilermaker, who's an intuitive machinist. Mints, who could charge candies into weapons. And Rotary, who could spin any object around. Yeah, seems like some of these guys hold the short end of the stick when it comes to their powers. Now, even despite some of these powers being still a little lame, Spidey still managed to learn some cool moves from them, skills that would actually come in handy later on in his crime-fighting escapades. Now, fast forward a bit, and things took a turn for the worst for this superhero team. Someone starts knocking off these Brooklyn Avengers one by one. Spider-Man, being the good guy he is, jumps back in to help out his pals. You know how these superhero stories go, there's all kinds of chaos. Their whole apartment building eventually got wrecked in the process. Despite the setback, these Brooklyn Avengers are resilient. They decide to stick around and help keep their neighborhood safe, even though they haven't made a comeback in Marvel Comics ever since. Who knows, maybe someday they'll swing back into action. At number 7 are the Slingers. So the origins for this one is a bit crazy, as Spider-Man got into some trouble he didn't ask for when he was framed for a crime he didn't commit. Thanks a lot, Norman Osborn. To clear his name, Spidey came up with 4 new superhero identities and rocked these 4 unique cool costumes. But once the mess was sorted out, he ditched those personas and went back to being your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Now here's where the plot thickens. You see, Black Marvel, an old retired hero, got his hands on those snazzy outfits and decided to hand them to 4 college kids. These young guns put on those suits and boom! One day you're a regular student and the next you're rocking a superhero suit fighting crime. These teens became the group known as the Slingers. Led by Prodigy, an expert freestyle wrestler with boosted strength thanks to his super suit, his team of Slingers also includes Dusk, who rocks a suit made from antimatter in the negative zone, which allows her to teleport, manipulate dark force energy, and she's also clairvoyant. Then there's the Hornet, a genius inventor slash expert in all things hard and software slash Olympic level athlete who actually had made his own Prowler suit first before being given the Hornet wings. And lastly, there's Ricochet, who has superhuman agility and who can chuck discs that deliver incredible force that also may explode on impact. The former monikers of Peter Parker may not be as famous as Spider-Man, but they're out there making a difference, one sling at a time. At number 6 is is Solo. Solo is a lesser-known ally of Spider-Man in the Marvel comic universe, whose name is actually James Bourne, a military man betrayed by his own team, who transformed into Solo, a guy who's all about hunting down terrorists and bad guys. He's got this cool thing going on where he can also teleport, which definitely sets him apart from your average crime-fighting crew. Now, Solo doesn't always see eye to eye with Spidey, especially since Solo doesn't mind ending people. Nevertheless, sometimes they've got to team up to tackle some big bads together, sort of like a good cop, bad cop duo, but with superpowers. They've faced off against some serious threats side by side, making for some pretty epic comic moments. Plus, Solo even had a stint with Deadpool's crew of not-so-heroic heroes, the Mercs for Money. But staying true to his calling, he went back to his solo gig, fighting crime his own way. At number 5 is Nightwatch. Nightwatch, who honestly looks like a knockoff Spawn, albeit, and dare I say, slightly cooler looking with his demonic skull-shaped insignia on his face. Anywho, in the far future, he holds the moniker of Night Eater, who repents and attempts to undo his image as a villain, and so he results to altering the past. Now taking on the heroic moniker of Nightwatch, he actually would eventually try to reset everything and escape his now heroic responsibilities, but he was dragged back into heroism once more to stop a dude who had stolen parts of his costume. Eventually, he'd team up with Spidey against Carnage's chaos in New York City, leading to Nightwatch getting offed by a pair of criminals during the Great Game comic arc, but thanks to some comic book logic, he managed to survive. Now, eventually, She-Hulk would unravel the truth about his alternate future as a villain, and the reformed hero now faces the music behind bars. At number 4 is El Muerto. So picture a whole family of luchador wrestlers passing down a mystical mask called El Muerto that gives them extra powers, which is basically the setup for Juan Carlos Estrada's story. Now, poor Juan gets handed this responsibility, but ends up flubbing it by losing in a fight against a villain named El Dorado. The consequence is that Juan's got to beat Spider-Man to get his groove back, but that plan flops too. But instead of being all, I'm the hero, you're the loser, Spidey's like, let's team up, because got some moves, bud. Together they take down El Dorado, and Spider-Man helps Juan find his path. After that, Juan kind of fades into the background, occasionally popping up in some storylines. Now, El Muerto might not be the headline act, but that team up with Spider-Man was a pretty neat moment for this underrated ally. Coming up third is Bluebird. Back when Peter Parker first got his powers, Sally was right there in his world. She was full of energy, always seeking thrills, which often landed her in trouble. One time, she stumbled into a showdown between Spider-Man and Electro, but it was at this moment when Sally decided to become a DIY hero, suiting up as Bluebird. However, she was more of a bother than a help to Spider-Man, not really listening to warnings to stay out of it. Sadly, her heroic stint ended tragically as she perished in a car crash. Later on, a clone of Sally would show up, but it's unclear if this one survived for real or vanished like the rest of the clones. At number 2 is S.H.O.C. S.H.O.C might not be the most famous Spider-Man buddy, but this guy deserves a little bit of spotlight. Todd Field is just a regular dude whose dad worked for the bad guys, but only because he had no choice. Todd's dad was trying to make a powerful suit that taps into some crazy dark force dimension. But tragedy struck when a villain named the Crown offed Todd's dad and yoinked the suit. Todd, fueled by revenge and determination, rebuilt the suit, becoming the electrifying hero S.H.O.C. He and Spidey teamed up, taking down the Crown by overloading his suit. Now, S.H.O.C would eventually get caught up in some bad stuff, get zombified by the Hand, and taken down. Luckily, Wolverine and the team at S.H.I.E.L.D. helped him out, fixing his now zombified mind. Since then, nobody knows where S.H.O.C is, but man, he deserves more credit for his electrifying heroics. And at number 1 is Cardiac. Cardiac is a superhero who's kind of like the Punisher, but instead of taking down the Mafia, he's tackling the messed up healthcare system. So he's got a sick costume, cool gadgets, and a heart replaced by a fancy device called a beta particle reactor, which gives him powers that no regular human could have. Now, his origin story hits pretty hard. Elias Wortham, Cardiac's alter ego, lost his brother to an incurable disease. Motivated by tragedy, he studied medicine and ended up in a pharmaceutical company's board. But here's the kicker. This is where he discovered that the pharmaceutical company had actually hid a cure that could have saved his brother's life. Why? Because it wouldn't have made them as much money, obviously. That's the harsh reality Cardiac reflects, a system valuing profit over people's well-being. He's not just a regular hero. He fights with a sense of justice and moral obligation, making him a standout character deserving more recognition. He's not just muscles and gadgets, though. He's super smart, a genius in fact, and a skilled surgeon surgeon. But his beta reactor of a heart always needs recharging, and if it fails, he's in for some trouble. Now his gear is super awesome too. He has a staff that shoots energy blasts and a high-tech glider for quick flights. All in all, Cardiac is a hero taking on big problems with a big heart, or well, a big beta particle reactor heart. As always, if there's an underrated Spider-Man ally that you think I've missed in today's video, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and I'll have your suggestion included in the next iteration of this list. This has been AJ with Top 10 Nerd, and I'll catch you all in another video. Later, nerds!